When I was younger, I used to love playing a game that challenged how closely you paid attention to details. It was all about looking at zoomed in images of common things and trying to guess what they were. At first, the pictures looked completely random, just a jumble of shapes and colors. But when you stepped back and saw the full picture, it all made sense. Life can feel like that too sometimes, can't it? We experience events that seem random and confusing. Why did my boss assign that project to me? Why did we have to get pregnant now? Why did that sedan run the red light when I was going through? We often find ourselves wrestling with the whys of life, searching for meaning in what seems like random events. Wouldn't it be nice to know that there's a bigger picture, a reason behind all the randomness? Christmas is my favorite time of the year. I love the snow, the songs, the presents, and the time with the family. But even the Christmas story, with all its angels, shepherds, and wise men, can feel like a fairy tale, a sequence of disconnected events. What if there's more to the story than we see at first glance? What if it's not as random as it appears? Today we're going to explore answers to these questions as we wrap up our series on encounters with Jesus. Thank you for joining me on More to Life.
The sound of the soft hum of Christmas carols in the background. Rose never thought this Christmas would happen. Her daughter, Rachel, and granddaughter, Lily, had arrived late last night, a visit she hadn't dared to hope for. The political turmoil of the last elections had driven a wedge between them, opposing views, heated arguments, and months of cold silence. As she hears the creak of the staircase, Rose feels a nervous flutter in her chest. Rachel appears, carrying little Lily on her hip. The toddler buries her face into her mother's shoulder, shyly peeping out at her grandma. "Good morning, my sweethearts," Rose exclaims, her voice a melody of joy and hope. She hurries over, reaching out for Lily, who hesitates before offering a tiny smile. Rose's heart melts. Maybe today will be okay after all.
This season on More to Life, we've been focusing on the life-changing encounters people had with Jesus, each one revealing key themes that resonate with our own lives. From seekers of truth, to those who needed healing, to those searching for a fresh start or direction. These stories showed us that an encounter with Jesus offers transformation at every level, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Whether it's the search for authenticity, the power of faith, or the hope of new beginnings, each story in this series pointed to the same truth. Jesus meets us where we are, offering us more than we ever thought possible. This love brings healing, purpose, and direction, showing us that with Him, there's always more to life. Christmas story is one of the most well-known narratives in history, but like life, it can seem puzzling at first. From a young virgin finding herself unexpectedly pregnant, to a king issuing a decree that forces a young couple on a long, difficult journey. It seems like parts of the story are taking place by mere happenstance. For our final episode of the year, and it being the Christmas season, I'd like for us to take a second look at this story, because in it, we will see a pattern emerge. Events that seem random or inconvenient are woven into a larger, intentional plan.
Rachel chuckled softly, giving her one berry at a time. watching as Lily popped each one into her mouth, her tiny face lighting up with delight. Rose walked in. "Berries for breakfast?" she asked, her tone warm but teasing. "She loves them," Rachel replied. "It's easy." Rose smiled, but her attention was pulled away by the chime of her phone. She picked it up, and her brow furrowed as she opened a video message. It was from an old friend, a snippet from some pundit tearing into the political views Rachel had openly supported. The volume was loud. "These people are destroying the foundation of our society. Lazy, brainwashed youth who don't know better." "Really, Mom? You're playing that now?" Rose turned, startled. "What?" "I didn't mean anything by it," she fumbled with the phone. "I just thought it was interesting." "Interesting?" Rachel's eyes flashed. She stood up abruptly, scooping Lily into her arms. Rachel sat on the couch with Lily, trying to distract herself by reading those silly books.
Luke chapter 2 contains the story of the birth of Jesus, but it contains details that are often overlooked. I like reading Luke because he is meticulous in the details leading up to the birth of Jesus. His attention to detail helps us understand how some seemingly random events came together to fulfill a larger, more intricate plan. We begin in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. It says, "At that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken where Quirinius was governor of Syria. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for this census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child." The story begins with a powerful political figure, Caesar Augustus. Augustus, the first Roman emperor, was known for his ability to bring stability to Rome, following a long period of civil war. His decree for a census wasn't unusual. Taxation and registration were common practices, but the timing of this particular census was significant. What Luke doesn't mention is that there had never been a census of the entire Roman world before. Regional ones were common, but this was something new. The old way was to tax each community based on the number of its residents. But this was almost impossible to get an accurate count for, as people would hide or lie to keep taxes down for their community. This new idea was to have communities pay 1% income tax, and in addition, every citizen was required to pay a flat fee for simply having the privilege of being part of the Roman Empire. It was because of this new tax structure that required everyone to register in the town where they were born, not where they were living at the time. It may have seemed like another political move, but God was using Augustus's decision to bring Joseph and Mary to the exact place they needed to be, Bethlehem.
In the kitchen, Rose stood up by the stove, stirring vegetables on a pot. She's frustrated. The lingering tension from the morning, the sharpness of Rachel's words, and now the realization that she was left to handle everything alone. Taking a deep breath, she called out, "Rachel, can you come help me for a minute?" Rachel looked up, her expression neutral but wary. "Sure," she said. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice flat. "Start on the salad," Rose replied, trying to keep her tone even. Finally, she decided she couldn't keep it any longer. "I really think you were rude earlier," Rose said, her voice trembling slightly. "I regret your comments about me and my friends, calling us old and dumb. It's not fair." Rachel froze for a moment. She turned to face her mother. "I didn't say a word about you or your friends today," she said, her voice low but firm. "Why do you always feel the need to push this stuff on me? Do you think I'm going to throw away years of my own beliefs to instantly agree with you?" Rose opened her mouth to respond, but Rachel wasn't finished. And while we're at it, stop criticizing how I raised Lily. I'm doing my best, and I won't make the same mistakes you made. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Rose's breath hitched, but she didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say.
Caesar Augustus had no idea that his decree would fulfill a prophecy from centuries earlier. The prophet Micah foretold in Micah chapter 5 verse 2, "But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, are only a small village among all the people of Judah. Yet a ruler of Israel, whose origins are in the distant past, will come from you on my behalf." This small town of Bethlehem, insignificant by worldly standards, was destined to be the birthplace of the Messiah. And how did this happen? Through a decree from the emperor of the world's greatest empire at the time, a man who likely never gave a thought to a carpenter and his pregnant wife, which shows that God can use even the most powerful and indifferent leaders to accomplish his purposes. Imagine Joseph's life at this moment. He was a humble carpenter from Nazareth, engaged to Mary, who was now pregnant under miraculous circumstances. As we know from the Gospel of Matthew, Joseph initially had his doubts. In fact, he considered quietly ending the engagement to avoid public disgrace. But then an angel appeared to him in a dream, reassuring him that this child was indeed from God. Even with this divine reassurance, Joseph's life had taken an unexpected turn. He had to make a difficult choice. Would he believe the angel's message and stay with Mary, or would he just walk away? Joseph chose faith, but his faith didn't mean the journey would be easy. And now, with Mary nearly due to give birth, they were forced to make that long and difficult journey to Bethlehem because of the census. This journey was approximately 110 kilometers, a long distance over rugged terrain, especially for a woman in the final stages of pregnancy. Can you imagine what Joseph and Mary were thinking during this tiring journey? It would have been natural for them to question why. Why now, when Mary was so close to giving birth? Why Bethlehem, a small town far away from home? The timing may have seemed wrong from human perspectives, but in God's plan, it was perfect. He had orchestrated every detail so that his son would be born in the place prophesied centuries before. Joseph and Mary's journey wasn't by accident. It was part of a larger story, one that would change the world forever. In keeping with his commitment to historical accuracy, Luke mentions Caesar Augustus by name. Augustus wasn't always known as Caesar Augustus. His given name was Gaius Octavius, born in 63 BC. He was Julius Caesar's grandnephew. After Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, Octavius learned that his great uncle had adopted him, making him heir to all of Caesar's estates and titles. Over time, Octavius became the ruler of Rome, and the Senate granted him the title Augustus, which means revered one. Augustus played a significant role in Roman history, bringing about what became known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. His reign brought stability to the Roman Empire, and he was hailed as a god by many people in the empire. Coins were minted in his image, calling him the Son of God, a title that would later be challenged by the true Son of God, Jesus Christ. In a twist of divine irony, Augustus, who thought of himself as a god, unknowingly played a role in bringing about the birth of the actual Son of God. His decree, issued to expand his political power and control, ended up fulfilling God's eternal plan. Augustus wanted to count his people, but God was using him to fulfill a prophecy that would bring salvation to all people. When Joseph and Mary finally arrived in Bethlehem, the town was crowded with people who had come from all over for the census. Every inn was full, and there was no room for them to stay. So they found shelter in a stable, a place where animals were kept. It was in this humble setting that the Savior of the world was born. Luke chapter 2 verses 6 and 7 says, "And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them." The imagery of Jesus, the King of Kings, being born in such a lowly place is powerful. He wasn't born in a palace or surrounded by wealth and luxury. Instead, he came into the world in a stable. He was laid in a feeding trough for animals. This humble beginning set the tone for Jesus' entire ministry. He didn't come to be served, but to serve others. He didn't only come for the powerful and the elite, but for everyone, even the poor, the broken, and the marginalized. God could have arranged for Jesus to be born in the finest home in Bethlehem, but he chose a stable. Why? Because Jesus' birth was a message to the world that God's love reaches everyone, no matter their status or circumstances. His birth in a manger reminds us that God is present in the most unexpected places, even in the midst of our struggles and hardships.
The kitchen was quiet, save for the occasional clang of a pot. Rose and Rachel worked in near silence, the air thick with unresolved tension. Suddenly, the house shattered with uneasy quiet. Rose, grateful for the distraction. "Hello?" she said, her voice deliberately cheerful. "Oh, Judd, how are you?" Rose said. Rachel froze. She could hear the muffled voice on the other end of the line. She shot her mother a pointed look. "You want to come here for Christmas dinner?" Rachel gesturing wildly with her hands, her face a mix of disbelief and frustration. "I see," Rose continued, clearly at a loss for how to respond. "Well, we'd be happy to have you." Rachel mouthed, "Why can't you say no?" "Yes, Judd, we'll see you soon. Drive safely."
As we look at the events surrounding Jesus' birth, it's clear that none of them were by accident. Every detail, from the decree of Caesar Augustus to the journey to Bethlehem to the birth in a stable, was all part of God's plan. In Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, Paul writes, "But when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law, so that he could adopt us as his very own children." God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't make sense to us in the moment. Joseph and Mary may not have understood why they had to make such a long and difficult journey, or why there was no room for them in the inn, but God knew exactly what was going on. He was fulfilling his promises to his people, and his timing was just perfect. A natural question you might have hearing this message is, well, if God has a plan, does that mean he controls everything, including our choices? And the answer is no. God directs our paths, but he never forces our will. One powerful reminder of this is found in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, where it says, "We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps." This verse illustrates that while we have the freedom to make plans and choices on our own, God can still guide our steps to align with his ultimate purpose without overriding our will. God is all-knowing, but even though he knows the course of human events through history, he still allows us the freedom to choose. In other words, foreknowledge does not equal forecontrol. This balance between divine direction and human choice is part of the mystery of faith. God respects our free will, but he can still work through our decisions to ultimately accomplish his purposes. And so as we reflect on the story of Jesus' birth, we are reminded that God is at work in the details of our lives today as well, even when things seem random or chaotic. The challenges we face, the unexpected detours, the unanswered questions are not signs that our lives are out of control. Instead, they are opportunities to trust that God is working behind the scenes. Think about the situations in your life that feel random or frustrating. What if, like Joseph and Mary's journey to Bethlehem, your current circumstances are part of a bigger picture? What if God is using the very things that seem random or inconvenient to you right now? He could use those to bring about something far greater than you can imagine.
Uncle Judd sat near the dining table, his expression unreadable yet subtly judgmental. To Judd, the hustle of setting the table and preparing the meal wasn't his concern. These were women's tasks, as they always had been and always should be, at least in his mind. Chores, especially domestic ones, were beneath him. He had built his life on the idea that men were meant for greater things. Judd saw himself as the anchor in this room, a pillar of tradition and wisdom. He believed that without men like him, the world would spiral into chaos, consumed by modern ideals that weaken society. His silence wasn't a retreat. It was a statement, one meant to remind everyone of his place and theirs.
Reflecting on the experience surrounding the birth of Jesus, here are just a few practical coaching questions that can help you on your journey as you end this year and look forward to a new year ahead. Number 1, what situation are you facing in your life right now that feels random or out of place? Number 2, how would you feel if you knew that your current struggles are part of a bigger picture that you can't see yet? And number 3, what if that detour might be leading you exactly where you're supposed to go? If this presentation spoke to you today, I'd like to invite you to visit hopestudy.ca. There you will find easy to use online Bible study platform with several interactive guides on a variety of topics like this one. Additionally, I'd love to stay connected with you personally. Follow More to Life on social media, where you can message me directly with your questions, prayer requests, or even updates on your journey. Whether you're searching for answers, needing encouragement, or simply looking for community, I'd love to be there to support you on your journey.
The meal is consumed in silence, each person eating mechanically, as though the food is a formality rather than a source of nourishment. The air feels thick, each movement deliberate but awkward. Uncle Judd, with his usual smug air, breaks the silence. Why does it feel like we're walking on eggshells around here? His words hang in the air, more a statement than a question. What's going on? Rose, frustrated and wanting to dismiss the matter, "It's all in your head," she mutters, avoiding the uncomfortable reality of her own feelings. When the last bite is taken, the weight of the silence becomes too much for Rose to bear. Her Christmas is ruined. The sense of isolation is heavy on her shoulders. Her daughter avoids her, and her awkward brother only makes it worse. Just as she begins to gather the plates, Uncle Judd speaks again. His tone is demanding, even condescending. "Rachel," he snaps, "can you put that phone down for once?" She doesn't respond. Instead, she quietly puts the phone down. "You know," he starts, his voice lacking its usual arrogance, "I'm alone. No one wants me around. My 3 kids didn't invite me, and I didn't want to humiliate myself by calling them. So I called you, Rose." He swallows hard, his gaze dropping as if ashamed. "I know I'm obnoxious. I've always thought I knew more than everyone else about geopolitics, the economy, health. But that drove people away. And now I have nobody to spend Christmas with." There's a long pause. "If I could go back, I'd choose relationships over ideas." His eyes filled with a vulnerability they rarely see. "Please," he says softly, "don't let things like politics or stupid ideas drive you apart. Not when you still have a chance to make things right The room falls silent. Then, slowly, Rose stands up. Without a word, she approaches Rachel, and after a moment of hesitation, stands and steps into her mother's embrace. The hug is warm, filled with unspoken words, a sign of love that speaks louder than anything said before. There's more to life than one's ideas and passions. There's love, a divine love, God's love, vast and ever kind.
And so as we wrap up this first season of More to Life entitled Encounters with Jesus, I'm reminded that none of the encounters we've explored happened by accident. Each person met Jesus at just the right moment, and their lives were forever changed. These stories aren't just from long ago. They're invitations for you and me today. Much like those zoomed-in images we talked about earlier, life can feel often confusing and random. We struggle sometimes to understand why certain events happen or why we find ourselves in difficult or frustrating circumstances. Sometimes we need to simply zoom out, to take a step back and realize that your life is not by accident. What if what you're experiencing right now is part of a much bigger story? The good news is that Jesus meets us on our journey, and He offers to guide us and comfort us, whether we're searching for truth, needing healing, or just a new beginning. My invitation to you is simple. Take some time to connect with Jesus. Whether through reading the Bible or talking to Him in prayer, ask Him to bring hope, healing, and direction to your life. You don't need all the answers. Just invite Him into the space you're in right now. If that's your desire, just pray with me right now, wherever you are. Dear Jesus, thank you for the way you work in our lives, even when we don't always see it. As we end this season, I pray for every person watching. Help them to feel your presence, your love, and your guidance. Meet them in their homes, their workplaces, wherever they are, and remind them that nothing in their lives happens by accident. You have a plan for them. Give them the courage to invite you into their hearts and lives, and may they experience the hope and joy that only you can bring. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Once again, thank you for joining me, and remember, there's more to life, and that more is found in Jesus. Merry Christmas, enjoy this holiday season, and let's continue the journey in the new year together.